Hey everybody, I'm Echo33 and I'm a generative artist. Welcome to Send It, this crazy podcast where we go deep into the intersection of art and technology.
We're bringing you stories with artists, curators, tech founders, and visionaries. Today we're joined by Phil from the Node Foundation, a brand new project which everybody is excited about and speaking about. It's an exhibition space, it's an education lab and a culture engine, and they want to reimagine what digital art is. Previously, I know Phil from Pride Moments Gallery, which started out in Venice Beach, California, and then went around the world in 10 cities to create immersive art experiences. And as a collector, I loved going to all of those cities. I didn't make it to all of them, but I wish I had, because in each city it was a different theme. They created new events, the dinners, the connections you made, the art you minted. It was just an amazing creative project, which a lot of people enjoyed and came together throughout the last couple of years.
Congrats for the Node Foundation. It's an amazing project.
Thanks for having me.
So after your last Bright Moments city, I just heard randomly you moved to Rome with your freshly wed wife.
Yeah,
How was that?
good. We were not escaping the country, contrary to what some people thought. Yeah, the last Bright Moment City was a year ago today, actually. And we sort of looked at the map and said, well, bucket list, if we could live anywhere, where would we go? So we sort of picked a spot on the map and went to Rome. And we were there until the end of 2024 when the Node project brought us back to California. So a brief interlude, but it was a great experience. A lot of espresso.
Wow, that's a great random destination to fall into.
Yeah, it was really
Uh,
nice.
And I believe Node position itself as a network rather than a museum. Could you
Very intentionally, yeah.
explain? Yeah, I'm sure it's not a random thing, but could you explain, what it means? Imagine, let's say, a traditional art collector hearing this for the first time. What would that mean to someone who is not that knowledgeable about digital art and protocols and
Yeah, I think language is very intentional, and the choice of words conveys a sense of the destiny of what the thing will become. And early on, when we were having conversations, we were using words like institution, we were using words like museum, we were using words like gallery, and none of those quite felt right. And, one of the first things you have to do when you're trying to introduce something new to the world is explain the why, because that helps people understand. And that's a story that you can tell to others. And I think for us, the why is really around building this network of people. And I think we know that the age of the institution is coming to an end and the age of the network is rising. And that's powered by the technology that we use every day. And so I think, to flip the question around, you'd have to be hard pressed to explain to me why this isn't a network and why it should be something that feels more like a top down hierarchical institution. Because in my mind, that's a 20th century invention. And so it's 2025. We're a quarter of the way into the next century. We should be building organizations that, fit the mold of the way that we can organize now.
and what's the dimension about decentralized leadership within Node, if there's such a thing? Because for me, I'm thinking about the network, I mean, the blockchain networks by extension. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about decentralization. What's your take about that?
I have yet to see a great example of decentralized leadership work in practice. I think you need a strong leader to guide the vision. And if you start to lean a bit too much towards there being consensus, you'll end up being in the middle. One of the strong guiding principles for Node, we love the mid-curve meme. You know, the one that I'm talking about where there's the Jedi and then the mid-curve meme is so important because it conveys such a deep truth, which is most people feel safe being in the middle, being surrounded by the pack. And if you're going to do something and you want it to be original, it either has to be totally off the cuff, completely intuition driven, something that you feel in the moment, or you have to think very deeply about it and understand why it's worth going against the consensus. And I think that that's something that's very difficult for a group to do by definition. And so if you're going to do something different, you can't have a bunch of people trying to make decisions. You need to have someone with a very clear vision of what the future looks like that can help explain that vision to a, group of true believers, so to speak. And then from the small group, you can, establish a beachhead and establish it out. And I think we're very fortunate in that we have this subculture within the digital art community of people who believe in this future with us. So we're not starting from scratch. And I think, when people think starting a network, you sort of assume it starts with one node. But the way that I see it, we're tapping into this pre-existing network that exists, and we're trying to make sure that it has the resources and the long-term planning to be really successful in the future. And so, don't expect this to look like a DAO.
Okay, that's great to hear. And the three core missions or core values of Node is, I believe, you have the like education is one pillar. You have preservation as well. You also have the presentation. How do you show a digital work? And there's a lot of very interesting and insightful feedback, I would say, at the moment about collectors enjoying more seeing physical works on their walls, but hating the physical works collection. So it's like, and I can include myself in this, like I love purchasing digital art. The way I enjoy it the most is when it's on my wall as a physical work. I'm sure this is something you've had a lot of opportunities to experiment with Bright Moments. Now that this is also something as a core vision of Node, can you share some preliminary insights about this?
Yeah, the three pillars that you mentioned, um, you know, are are how we take our why and we put it into practice. And something that we want to be very intentional about with the foundation is, show, not tell. And so I would say, don't expect us to produce a lot of think pieces or Twitter threads or things about how we think you should do things. Expect us to try to show you what we believe is right. And we won't always get it right. But what we want to do is put action into the world and say, hey, we're going to put a stake in the ground. Here's the way that we think you should do this. And you're right, through the experience that I think we all had for anyone who attended a Bright Moments show, I think presentation was at the heart of those shows. It was a way of giving an artist a way to present their work and a way to create the art live, which is just something that's so important for algorithmic works, for generative works, for on-chain works. This act of minting is such a core part of the medium that it you can't abstract it away and expect people to still understand. And so maybe just touching on this first pillar, when sort of the Bright Moments roadmap ended in April, there was a period of about 6 months where we would meet every couple of weeks for coffee, for lunch, as a group, as a team, as a community, and just sort of look around and say, well, we had this amazing project. We said we were going to do these 10 cities. We did it. But there's all of this work that feels like it still has to be done. We sort of, tried to spark the fuse, but we see all these opportunities, and yet no one has taken and run with it, right? Whether it's the ability to get together in person, whether it's the way that you innovate on displaying works, whether it's ways of creating new experiences for live minting, whether it's ways of explaining, on-chain art to people in a way where they can collect the first time. And we thought for a long time, okay, what is it that we need to do? Should we help other organizations do it? Should we try to build software and technologies to do it? And ultimately, the opportunity to come here and build the foundation and do something new was like, okay, great. We can apply all of these lessons that we learned as a community, and we can do it in a way that is long-term oriented, that is insulated from some of the, ups and downs, financial pressures of the short-term market, which, as we know, is highly variable, is this sort of insane boom and bust cycle that is just not conducive to the practice. And so around presentation, I would say we're going to let artists lead us here. We're going to have a lot of conversations with artists around the way that they want their work to be shown. and we're going to try to build a space that can be a canvas for that. And there's, I think the challenge with digital art spaces is there's a lot of capex involved. It's not four white walls that you can rent and paint and then the next week have a show up and running. You need to find screens, you need to find projectors, you need to find panels, speakers, because the medium, sometimes is physical, sometimes it can be, converted into a canvas or a drawing or a plotter, but oftentimes it does need to be digital. And so I think our ability to sort of spend and to create a space that artists can take over and then allow them to innovate on top of that is going to be really important on the presentation side. As it relates to education, there's a lot of work to be done. Um, we are more than a decade into this on-chain crypto experiment, and most people still don't have something tangible they can touch every day. And I think the experience that we've seen from technology is people don't need to know how it works in order to get value out of it. Ask anyone on the street what URL stands for, and you'll, 9 times out of 10 not get an answer. But every single person knows that they can go into the browser and type something into that bar and get what they want. So they don't need to understand the underlying technology in order to get value out of it. And I think we're stuck in this weird space where we try to over explain ourselves, where we try to make everybody an expert, where we try to get everyone to write down 12 words and stick them in their, grandmother's fireproof safe. It's like, if that's the barrier to getting people started in the space, we're never going to onboard the public. We're never going to onboard the masses. We're never going to get people interested because it feels esoteric, because it feels like something that's inaccessible if you haven't studied computer science. And so I think around education, we need to start with um, students. We need to start with, existing educational institutions.
Where
We
where
need to
where do
start
you
with,
think the big onboarding curve will come? Is that with a good application, with a good end user application? I remember when we met is I walked into Bright Moments London. You didn't know that I was doing Six Machina with George. And you were like, well, here's a wallet, and you got to download this MetaMask and write the 12 words down or whatever. That was sort of like a big part of your
yes,
thing, or of you
no, for
guys'
sure.
thing in the last 10 cities. Where do you think, like, what is your experience tell you is a big onboarding curve?
I'm
Because
so
that's
glad
not
that
it.
that Yeah, I'm so glad we had that shared experience. I think that as the technology evolves, our ability to onboard people will get better. Um, think about it like think about crypto and the access to technology like a luxury good. It starts expensive, it starts complicated. And as we get better at producing it, it gets cheaper and it gets simpler. And anytime something gets cheaper and simpler, more people can access it. And so if we're selling something that costs $100,000 and you need to have someone personally onboard you to do it, the number of people in the world is about a handful. There's just not that many people who it's interesting towards. But as it gets more accessible and as the technology to access it becomes more widely available, you can onboard more people. And so, Nick, to answer your question, I think there's going to be a progression that we want to guide people through, starting with very simple. What's the one sentence explanation where if you have them for 10 seconds, you can get them in the space? And then there's a way to lead them further down sort of the knowledge path. Hey, if you're an artist that's interested in creating with this medium, we want to explain how you can, you know, deeply use this in a way that's innovative. If you're a person who writes, who is a creative coder and is familiar with JavaScript, let's talk to you about Solidity. Let's get you, down the rabbit hole so you can understand how smart contracts can maybe extend your practice. But the person off the street does not need to know that. And I think the ability to have a physical space will reinforce our ability to do education to the public. Um, you know, in terms of our audience, I think
Give me your TLDR currently on something totally unrelated to Node, but Warpcast, Coinit, all these things
okay,
that are happening.
you,
Because
you
Jean-Jacques, I don't know if you know, Phil's always on he's pretty good on like the touch of like what's happening in the space further than just art. I think you showed me Warpcast must have been early 23 in
yeah,
Paris.
yeah.
Remember?
I do. Warpcast started down the street from the first Bright Moments gallery. So we
Mm.
were on Windward. They were off of Abbot Kinney. And so I met Dan and Varun when they were still onboarding people by sending you DMG files to install onto your MacBook. Probably
But
not the best security practice.
what do you think about the TLDR on all these applications that are coming out regarding onboarding? Like which ones are hot and which do you think have faded out and are not really working?
Yeah, the risk with doing these is this interview will last forever. So at risk of sounding completely wrong, maybe I can read you just here's what I said when Zora launched their new coining protocol. Here's just a piece of it.
Hmm.
Um, I'm excited for the new model of coining content. It doesn't replace NFTs, but I think it opens a new aperture for artists to experiment. And I think when artists can experiment, it makes the world a little bit more beautiful. And so I'm interested in this capability for artists and creators to earn. And part of one of the things I thought deeply about after the conclusion of the roadmap was all of these problems that we experienced when we were trying to build the Bright Moments community around the world. I have a list of them about a mile long of all the things that we ran into, all the problems that
Hmm.
we just trying to operate an artistic practice on chain and help artists mint their work.
Hmm.
And we took that list at the end of the roadmap and I stack ranked it. And I said, okay, what are the 20, 25, things that are still problems that just shouldn't be problems at all? I can't get access to cryptocurrency on my phone in order to buy work. I buy work and I change my cell phone and I lose access to the art that I bought. I have a photo of my seed phrase and now there's a risk that I lose something if I keep like all of these just ridiculous things. And we set out to try to see if we could make a dent on solving some of them. And then I always keep an eye out for people that are trying to solve in other ways. And so I think if you can ignore some of the noise from the Twitter sphere around the pearl clutching that comes from anything that challenges the existing model, um, you you need to try something before you criticize it. That's my mo. And there's obvious exceptions to that, but in the vast majority of cases, the people who are commenting on this have never actually tried the products, tools, services that they're so quick to dismiss. And so I think if you try that, you'll get much further ahead than most people. Most people are just not willing to do the work of actually trying things.
Love that answer.
Yeah.
Jean-Jacques,
Um,
have you coined things yet?
Chat. Warpcast, yes, indeed. I used it a lot. I also know that there is like, I was reading on Substack, I think yesterday, where someone was sharing the feedback that there's so much interesting article that if you need to pay the writer $5 for each article you want to read, this is just not sustainable at all. So maybe this approach is like an interesting experiment, at least because you have this kind of very granular way to compensate great content. So you don't have to take the world subscription, but you can give like small bits for each article. So yeah, I'm sure some interesting trends will come from this. I don't know which one, but there's definitely problems to be solved here. If we go back to the node foundation, I'm trying also. I mean, there is such an interesting like massive event of in 2025 around the foundation. There's we start to see some content around here explaining things. I remember that I think that Mickey mentioned that he was seeing like Node as being the last mile of digital art, and I would be curious to know your thoughts about how do you see this last mile being provided for artists, for example.
yeah. There's a lot of people doing great work in the space to present digital works. So we always have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do different? And what is it that we bring that's going to make artists want to show their works here and that's going to get people interested? Because there are so many distractions in the world. And so anytime that you create something, whether it's a physical event or a physical space, you're not competing against the people down the street. You're competing against every other thing that that person could be doing with their time. You're competing against social media. You're competing against Netflix. You're competing against with them having dinner with their family. And so you need to create a space where there's an obvious reason for people to tell their friends about why they should come. And I think that changes over time. And so the beauty about art is you can experience technologies and you can experience things that feel like the future. I really believe that for digital art, that is the main capability that artists bring to the table that is something that people really want. There's a sense, I think, with how quickly digital technology is progressing. There's a concern about being left behind. There's a concern about not being a part of whatever's coming next. And I think art spaces can do a really good job of having artists display that to people. I'll give you one example. On Thursday, when we announced the foundation's founding grant, Beeple made an everyday about Node, and like that's major bucket list item. I was totally I just absolutely like I think I got the message at 7 p.m. and my wife and I were like, watching a movie or something, and I said, we're getting in the car, we're driving to Node, I'm putting the everyday on all of the screens outside of Node, and I'm taking a picture because this is like I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. And we have here at Node some things that we've been experimenting with internally. And one of them is one of the little unitree robots. Have you seen this? The dogs that walk around?
Yes.
Um, at Beeple Studio, he has a bunch of these dogs. And anytime
With
they
the
do an event, the
Mario,
dogs
Mario heads. Yes.
exactly. And so, we have a unitree dog, and I put the everyday on the screen that's visible from the outside of the space. And I had the dog, and I walked it outside, and all I wanted to do was get a video of the dog walking, sitting in front of the screen, and waving at the camera. That was it. 45 minutes later, I was still there and I couldn't get my video because crowds of people kept showing up to look at the dog because it feels new, because it feels like the future, because it feels like something that you've never seen before. And that's what people want. People want to have an experience or a feeling of just something that's different from their everyday lives. And I think media has gotten so bad at doing this because it's mid curve. What we talked about at the beginning, it's so safe to be in the middle. No one's ever going to criticize you if you fail and you're in the middle because, oh, what were they supposed to do? They tried, what they were supposed to. If you fail and you're way out on the edges, then you catch an enormous amount of criticism from everyone. But if you can sort of tune that out and you can be willing to try things that are new and you're not worried about failure, then you have the opportunity to really show something new to people. And I think that robots are a great example of something like this. I'm really excited for artists to experiment with them, to try new things, not just screens and projectors and all of this, but all of these different forms of technology that drive the creative process. That's the history of art. As new technology gets invented, it pushes the artistic practice forward. Artists produce something that's provocative. People debate over whether or not it's even art to begin with. And then 20 or 30 years later, it seems so obvious that this had to happen. It feels inevitable. And so, I feel like we're part of this evolution.
It feels challenging though to take the time to master a new like technical revolution as an artist when everything is moving so fast. In a way, I was just thinking about what you said is like learning how to, I don't know, painting with oil paint takes a crazy amount of time to master. I'm thinking about the same parallel today, where like everything is moving so fast. So yeah, it's finding the right balance between dedicating and committing.
Of
Uh,
course.
yeah,
Of
I
course. And
mean,
that's why this requires a community. I don't
not
think
by
it's
not being mid curve also means that everybody here is we are. I mean, it's obvious to us that we're all very willing to fall flat on our face a few times. Taking these risks, doing new things, and you guys were. I mean, at bright moments, you guys were like battling an uphill battle because the markets were most of the time going down and getting worse with each city,
right.
and it was harder to sell art with each city. How much do you think bright moments experience will be influenced to Node? In the sense of you guys as a collective, I don't know the inner works of it, but you guys came up with such like little nuances, how you presented London, difference to Berlin, difference to this. How much of that will people see with this new project?
It's a great question. I think Node is going to benefit from the shared creativity of not only the Bright Moments community, but hopefully the broader digital art space. And you know, um, I'm happy to be doing this podcast here with you guys, and I feel very fortunate that as someone who gets to sort of be a representative of Node, I get to speak for it. there's a whole group of people who are going to be necessary to make this thing successful. I
Mm-hmm.
know how well and how hard people from the Bright Moments core team, Bright Moments artists, Bright Moments community work to make this a reality. And I hope that they come and help with Node, and some of them already are. I think also, we want Node to be above some of the tribalism that's so common in this space. I don't want people to feel as though, oh, Node, it's digital art, but it's only generative, and so that's not a network for us. Or
Mm-hmm.
they really only focus on AI works. I think these small nuances and details can cause such large divisions between people that we need to zoom out and see the bigger picture and say, hey, as an entire community, as a group of people who are producing this art form, we need to find creativity wherever it exists. And so I think, a big part of the Bright Moments DNA was this sense of being scrappy, was the sense of being willing to reinvent ourselves over and over and over again and never do the same thing. And I'm really excited to bring that DNA in. And I feel really fortunate to have such an amazing group of people that I can trust, rely on, bring into the picture when we need to have creative conversations that are, have helped us produce the Bright Moments journey, but also people that I met along the way that are currently fighting their own fight to make their own institution successful. There's people who are doing things not only here in the United States, but in Europe, in Asia, in South America, all over the world, who I know personally, who I'm really excited, one day to pick up the phone and say, hey, we have an amazing opportunity to do something together at Node. Are you in? And it just feels like the space has gone through this sort of this very tumultuous roller coaster. I was talking with a mentor of mine recently, and he described it as the trough of disillusionment, was, I believe, the word that he used, which is basically, this is the point in the technology cycle where everyone gives up and you're sort of left with only the true believers. And yes, it's difficult, but one of the benefits of this, this trough is the people who are still around are in it, and you get really amazing creativity from these constraints. And so I'm really excited for the next couple of years. I think we're going to have an amazing opportunity to really produce some things that change the way that people think about the medium. Um,
I felt the same way about this current moment. Sort of like now we've been through a lot of bear cycles and downturns, but now it feels like an opportunity again.
yeah,
Just generally, like we're so low and everybody's so fed up with everything that now is the time to make some interesting quote unquote moves.
I have, yeah, I have like a useful frame for this. There's a saying in investing where it's like the only way to make money is by doing things that people don't think is popular. If you're only doing things that are popular, even if you're right, you're never gonna have some sort of upside compared to other people. I think when you're trying to do new things, there's the sort of same sort of arbitrage, but with status. And with, if you are at a dinner party and you're explaining what you do to somebody, and every single person around the table agrees that it's prestigious or high status, it's probably not the right thing to be doing, because it means that you're doing it for the approval of other people, or that you're joining late after all of the interesting things sort of have been done already. And
Hmm.
so I find myself, when I tell people what I'm doing, if it doesn't seem a little bit weird to some of the people that I'm talking to, right? Unless I'm sort of in a group like this among friends where I think we have the shared, belief or delusion, um, then I probably need to reevaluate what I'm doing. And so,
Belief for delusion is a good.
well, that's the mid curve, right? If you go to the Node Foundation's Twitter, you'll see,
I
for a couple of days after we launched the website, we had sort of the mid curve memes. And if you look at those images, what they all have in common is it's two words that sound like opposites, but are actually the same. And I think that sort of horseshoe theory deeply underpins the belief. And so, yeah, belief or delusion, sort of depending on when you ask and who you ask, are probably actually the same thing. And it's just a matter of time.
Did and I believe, yeah, it's also mentioned that, yeah, node is yours, and based on what you said, is like it's for everyone to join and help to kind of strengthen the network. What would be the best way to help the Node Foundation today for people who listen to this podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, In the short term, we've created something symbolic. So you can go to nodefoundation.com and you can sign our mantra. And this is a gasless transaction. If you sign up with an email, if you have a wallet, it's less than a penny. And it's just, we're trying to convey the fact that we want you to really read. It's not very long. It's a couple paragraphs. That's our why. That's our mantra. That's something that we don't expect to change in the 10, 20, 30 years that we're going to be building the beginning of this network. And so read it. If you agree with it, sign the mantra. Over the long term, one of the best things you can do is come visit in person and help us form that community. And I deeply believe that our ability to have conversations like this digitally are fantastic. We can do things much faster. We can share ideas, but the act of getting together in person is meaningful because it means you're not doing all the other things you could be doing. When you're getting on a plane and flying somewhere, there's an opportunity cost to doing that. And I think people realize that. And so, when we open and when we have exhibitions for artists and when we're doing events, please come in person. Make the trip to Palo Alto. And the reason that we want to be here in person is, Silicon Valley has been the home to the creation of so many technologies that have changed the way that we work and live and play. But we need a cultural backbone for this technological innovation. Otherwise, we're not going to have a rudder. And so it's very important to us that we can build this sort of cultural backbone, and then it represents our belief system here in Silicon Valley. And so, it's the home of the computer. It's the home of many of the, software technologies that create the world today, but it needs to also be the home of this computer art, and it needs to be the home of the digital creativity that people are creating with these machines. Otherwise, we're going to lose our way. And as we have this sort of runaway technological progress, and every 2 months the AI models get better, we need something to sort of ground us and remind us about human creativity. So, come make the trip, and we'll have plenty of opportunities for you to come see it in person.
I mean, one thing I think we have a similarity at is when you spoke to the two of us in college, I would have never guessed I would be that interested into art.
Yeah.
And I think for you it was the same thing. What drives you still back into the art stuff? What is the main driver for you? Because for
Yeah.
me it was digital art felt more like innovation. Some of the coolest innovation and ideas are here.
Yeah. I think about it often. And I think some of it comes back to this, just like, I'm not sure what to call it, but deep internal drive to try to find where the future is going. And I believe that artists show us where the future is going better than anyone else can. And way before it has commercial applications, way before there's a way to generate a profit and a loss statement off of a technology, artists are out there at the edges tinkering with it. And,
Do
we
you
talk about it
think that there's commercial applications for some of the art we see today?
often. I think so. I think often the artwork inspires things that are transformed into commercial applications. And, sometimes that attribution isn't super clear, but there's creativity in the form of artwork is something where it's sort of freed from the need to have this commercial response. And so I think there's just a broader set of possibilities of what you can produce as an artwork or an art object with new technologies. And often when people are prototyping things, they'll give it to artists and they'll say, what do you think? What do you see with this? What's possible? And that's
Mm-hmm.
very different from, hey, how does this justify the return on my investment? Because when you're looking through that really narrow aperture, you can go super deep, but you're limited in terms of how broad you can go because it needs to fit within your business model. It needs to fit within, all of the other priorities you have, versus when you give something to an artist, they can think about, well, what could this be? What are all the possibilities? And so, yeah, I agree. How art found me, I think, was in its own way, and everyone has their own story. But for me, it came through technology, and it came through my interest in seeing new things and having new experiences. And when I think about the time that I've spent with people who are interested in the arts, um, each of them have their own reason why they're interested in it. And that's very different from when I spend time with people in business or commercial settings, where often the reason they're interested in something is because there's a great opportunity to make money. And that's okay. I'm, I live in the United States of America. I consider myself a capitalist. I'm fine with making money, but I need to have that balance. I need to have the time that I spend with creative people and helping people create ideas, not for how much money it's going to generate, but for the amount of ideas that it can spark when people see it and sort of try to evoke new feelings. And that gives me a lot of energy. And that's probably why I keep coming back to it.
It's a great thing that you are so close from the backbone, as you mentioned, of like the epicenter of like new tech startups, because I think the kind of the cliche you hear about customer research is like making qualitative data, doing customer interviews. I've never heard, and I've read a crazy amount of books on the topic. I don't think I ever read or heard someone who said to see the potential, economic potential of an innovation, you should share the product with artists. And this is a fascinating point of view. And yeah, I hope like that locally, and I'm sure you will have this kind of awareness that maybe going to the Node Foundation for new tech founders would be something very interesting to do, to kind of have edge cases about what they're working on.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in serendipity and working with the door open. And look, I am as much an internet maxi as anyone you'll find. I love social media. I think it is something that has changed my life in many ways for the better. I try to spend my time around groups of people that are positive when I'm choosing my social media networks and my presence. But I think it's, for me, unequivocally been a great thing for my life and my ability to connect. With that said, it is not the same as being together in person with people and having the chance encounters when you have the door open and someone stops in and Nick walks into the gallery in London and we have this conversation. Here we are 2.5 years later, continuing to talk and build a relationship. And so it's very intentional being here in Palo Alto. I had the door open yesterday and a gentleman stopped by because he saw the robot on the ground and he goes, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I explained, this is going to be an art space and we'll exhibit art. And he goes, "Hey, my office is downstairs and we're producing robots. Would it be okay if I showed you sometime, new things that we're working on?" And that sort of serendipity is just so important to have. And look, I'm from a little town in Western New York. If I tried to do this there just wouldn't be the density of people. And so where you choose to do this matters. And I think that there are art capitals all over the world. People don't traditionally think about Palo Alto as an art capital. But I think in terms of where technology is created and where people are willing to suspend disbelief for a period of time to try to imagine the future when it comes to new technology, you'd be hard pressed to find a place as important as here. And the density of people who have that capability to say, yeah, I'm willing to, listen to the story you have. And no matter how far fetched it sounds, try to imagine what the future would be like if it's real. I think that's really important to have a successful art movement.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in the art space, in our niche, is like, when are we going to onboard the traditional art market? And Jean-Jacques and I have discussed this many times. He has a point of view he'll share maybe in a minute. And I have a point of view that traditional art people are too old. They don't understand technology. I think it's more like technologists, VCs, Palo Alto people who will look at this and like, wow, this is really cool. They have a bigger chance of understanding why this is cool and creative and actually has monetary value than somebody who collects paintings. But I like Jean-Jacques' version as well because it's sort of like cute and romantic, but
For me, it's more like the end game. Like for me, like say a successful, if we go look back like 10 years from now and we say, how could we be successful in terms of digital art adoption? It would be, let's say, grandfather or grandmother, like 75, 80 years old. They collect a piece of digital work with their grandson or granddaughter. And this is for me like reuniting the art collecting experience across generations. And I think, as you said in the beginning, Phil, it's not about the inner workings and the computer science background required to safely mint and preserve our work. It's just the pure passion of the art, transcending the mediums and the complexity of the technicalities involved, just to create great memories and great moments across generation. So I think we all want to go at the same place. We just have different ways to look at it. And I'm sure everyone is thinking about how can we welcome more like traditional art collectors and just like random people who just would like to, because let's say some very top blue chip artworks like costing, I don't know, 120 millions. I mean, the distribution is very easy. If you have the money, you can buy the painting pretty much. Today, we have the opportunity to like micro split or share extremely potentially valuable artworks and give the access to everyone in decentralized way with full custody and so on. But the distribution makes it extremely difficult. So we will be finding a point in the middle, I'm sure, to kind of make everything connect. It's a matter of time, but we'll find a way.
I, I'm always open to experiments. I do think that some of the human desires that lead to collecting are not going to change based on the technology. And one of the experiences that I've had very strongly is people own artwork to preserve a feeling state for themselves, and they own artwork to feel like they're part of a broader community. And that community is, I think very obvious with digital artwork and especially with on-chain artwork because you can sort of directly see all of the other people that hold it. It doesn't necessarily mean you want to join a Discord, but I think as far as it, leads to your identity, people do strongly associate with the works that they buy. Um, I'm really curious to see. You mentioned the fractionalization experiment. I'm curious to see if this is something that plays out because I do think art collecting is emotional, and to me, the over financialization that can come from some of like just because you have the capability doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be a possibility. And so I'm curious to see how the fractionalization experiment works. I personally, and this is an area where I'd be happy to be proven wrong, have not found myself compelled to own a fractionalized artwork. And the reason for that is to me, it doesn't evoke, it's not the emotional state to me. Maybe as a financial decision, I'm open to it, right? Maybe if I'm someone who feels as though speculating on this work and using it as a financial instrument is a good idea. And, it's a, better way to sort of risk adjust my bet. But it doesn't solve to me the core need of often why people collect artwork, which is like almost like this memory machine. I want to be able to see this thing and, in the same way that when I walk outside and I'm smelling fresh cut grass and I'm transported back to when I was, in middle school, sitting in a hot classroom right before summer break, artwork can do the same thing. It can put you into the same emotional state. And it's like this sort of strange external stimulus that works on our bodies. And I haven't been able to experience that with fractionalized work yet. It's very odd. I don't know why. But
Maybe also there's a way, because fractionalization, I don't know, the first thing which comes to my mind is like you take an artwork, you cut small pieces from it, and everyone has like, but maybe what you've
yeah,
done with like the great set of crypto Venetians, it's like each crypto citizen is standing
yeah,
on their own,
yeah.
but maybe it's a fraction of the entire thing.
So it's interesting to me that obviously I'm biased, but to me that works, and it's because there is some amount of uniqueness within a broader community. I think, yeah, these networked digital objects that we have become fascinated with as a community, they're very mysterious. They're very mysterious,
I
and
think
like I think we're only a couple years into it, and so anytime someone tries to explain to me a grand theory of why it works, I think that it's like us trying to explain physics to ourselves. It's probably way spookier than we think. And there's a great saying uh, from there's a an advanced physics course in college, and on the first day of the course, the students walk in, and the professor says, "Do you know why this is called advanced physics?" And he says, because if we understood it, it would be called elementary physics. And I think there's probably something similar going on with this medium that we're a part of, it's like we don't really understand it very well, and we can poke it and try to experiment with it, but empirically we just have to kind of see what comes out of it. And so yeah, I'm excited to run those experiments here.
And thanks to visionaries like Becky and Mickey, that we can stand the test of time and look back in like 10, 15 years from now, because such foundation have been created, that we can look back and say, oh, we ran all these kind of very interesting experiences and this is what we learned from it. I think that's also a magic thing to be able to run such experiments.
Absolutely. It's keeping in a very long tradition of art being supported by a small set of patrons who believe very deeply in something that's non-consensus. And when they first spoke with me about their idea for this foundation, for what they wanted to create, um, it wasn't something that a lot of people were talking about. It wasn't on anyone's radar. It wasn't a race to get there first. And I think for a long time we might be the only. And that's okay, because they're willing to act with conviction and sort of put this thing out into the world. And it's really necessary, I think, for an ecosystem to survive, to have these different players. And there's all sorts of different organizations that play their role. I think there's obviously the artists who produce the work. There's the sort of existing institutions, which I see as all the way on one end, which sort of, when it's a fait accompli, they're gonna, of course, yes, welcome in, and like we'll be there for that. Um, but then there's all of these things that need to exist in the middle. And I think as the initial wave of speculative capital has left the ecosystem, there's now been a need for a longer term group of people who are willing to say, we're going to plant the flag and we're going to stick with this thing and we're going to do it for a long time. And so it's one of the reasons why I was so excited to come help, build Node, is because it's very unusual that you get a chance to do something in your life that's gonna live on after you're gone. It's very rare. And so when you're presented with an opportunity to do something like that, you better jump at it. And just from the conversations that I've had with Mickey and Becky and the people around them and the types of questions they were asking, it was very clear to me that this was something that they had, a very long-term approach on. So I'm of the mindset, when you see something like that, you got to grab it with both hands and, just try to keep up.
Wisely so. Great. Well, thank you very much, Phil. It's enlightening experience. I think it helps a lot to understand a little bit more about the internationality which was put in like crafting the vision and the whys of the Node Foundation, knowing a little bit more about the team and all the smart people involved, and also like their background. So thank you very much for sharing all that.
No, it was cool
Yeah,
to
thank you,
catch up. It
guys for
was
having
like
me.
a catch up and a podcast at the same time,
Yeah, yeah,
you
it's
know?
always good. Maybe we do the next one in person. We can maybe get a little makeshift podcast studio here at Node, and we'd love to come host you guys.
You're so now you're full-time Palo Alto?
Yeah, I moved here with my wife in January, and we live very close to Node, which is going to be important given how many times a day I stop in to make sure things are going on track.
Awesome.
But I'm here. This year is going to be very busy. Turns out that building a physical art space is a lot of work. Who would have guessed? And so,
Yes.
yeah, we're running at full speed to get it up and running and show people what we're working on.
That's really cool.
I think I'll see this within less than 6 months.
Yeah,
I'll start to speaking with Mickey, and he say, "Hey, you should come by," and also what you said, like being in person, discussing, trying to see the best way to help, understanding, like see what's going on. This is priceless, definitely.
well, absolutely. And I think anyone who's built something knows early feedback has such an important effect on their trajectory, whether it's an organization or a service or a product. Those people who are involved at the beginning, there's fewer people, and so you have more weight to the opinions that you express. And so one of my priorities this year, as we're building out the space, is to talk to as many people as possible, to have as many people come and see as possible whose work I deeply respect. And so I would love to have you come visit. I would love to hear, what for you would make for an incredible, presentation experience, and hopefully we can, build something we're proud of.
For me, talking about that first feedback, I think everybody who first time walked into a Bright Moments gallery and minted this citizen, it was a special little thing. So many times, Jean-Jacques. I don't know. I don't think you've actually done any cities, right?
No, actually,
That
I
first
desperately
one.
tried to mint a crypto Venetian, but I was remote, so I even hired on a website people to randomly show up, but it didn't work.
um, that's funny.
It's
Yeah, there
okay.
was there that that physical gating early on was such an important part of the culture. And yeah, and Nick, to your point, the reason it was special, the technology and the art, of course,
That
but it was
kept you
because
going
of the
throughout.
presentation. Right.
Hmm.
It was the people. It was the fact that you would walk into the room and it would be Christian Dole in character. And it would
Hmm.
be, Jeff behind the scenes making sure that the technology was working. And it was Chan and the work that he had put in 6 months prior to make sure every pixel was perfect. And it was, Seth making sure that there was just one more thing that was going to totally blow. And so there was this entire group of people that were surrounding you. And so it was like this infectious energy. And so,
Yeah.
that experience has just shaped so much of my perspective on what it takes to create a memorable art experience. And I know we're sort of over time here, but one point is when you go to look at art most places, you're by yourself,
You've and
and
you
and
feel.
you're
I
in a
feel
room.
dull
Well, you're in
often.
a room with other people and you don't talk to anybody. You're like
Hmm.
afraid to raise your voice above a certain decibel because someone's going to come out and tell you to be quiet. And that's not
Hmm.
what the art I think is just such a unique differentiator for this medium. People are creating work today. We're not looking at something that happened 25, 50 years ago, nor is the artist sort of at the sunset of their career and we're doing a retrospective. It's like, no, they're right in front of you, and if you want to understand, you can ask them a question. And that sort of living energy is just so important. And you just don't get that online. And often you get someone managing a social media profile. It's just like it's two-dimensional compared to what you get. And so yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think it's going to be such an important part of any presentation of work is that artist presence. So
Great. No,
Hmm.
it's amazing. It's super exciting. It's a beacon of hope in like the turmoil. It was like, wow, it's a great, great thing. And yeah, anything we can do to help Phil, uh, please let us know anytime.
I will.
The
I
last.
will.
The
I will be
last.
asking for a lot of help.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Phil.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Please let me know when this is going to air. I can help boost it. Okay, perfect. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Have a great day. Cheers. Cheers.